The morning that changed everything. The crisp October morning began like any other at Kensington Palace. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her bulletproof vest beneath her dark suit, checking her earpiece one final time before beginning her shift. As Prince George's personal protection officer, she had developed an almost maternal instinct about the young prince's safety. Today marked his first public appearance at the Chelsea Flower Show, and something in the air felt different. Sarah had been protecting members of the royal family for 8 years, but George held a special place in her professional heart. At 10 years old, he possessed a curiosity about the world that both delighted and worried his security team. He asked endless questions about everything from the flowers they would see today to why Sarah always wore sunglasses indoors. The morning briefing had been routine. Detective Inspector James Crawford, head of the Royal Protection Unit, reviewed the day's schedule with military precision. The prince would arrive at the flower show at 11, tour 3 specific gardens, meet with selected dignitaries, and return to the palace by 3. Simple enough, yet Sarah's instincts told her to stay extra alert. Prince George bounded down the palace stairs, his enthusiasm infectious despite the early hour. His nanny, Mrs. Eleanor Davies, followed closely behind, carrying his jacket and a small backpack with his favorite snacks. The boy had been looking forward to this outing for weeks, particularly excited about seeing the butterfly garden that had won this year's gold medal. As they approached the waiting convoy of black Range Rovers, Sarah conducted her final security check. She spoke quietly into her microphone, confirming positions with the advance team already stationed at the flower show. Everything appeared normal, yet that nagging feeling in her stomach refused to disappear. The journey to Chelsea took exactly 23 minutes through London's busy streets. Sarah sat in the front passenger seat of the prince's vehicle, constantly scanning the sidewalks and intersections. Her trained eyes noted every pedestrian, every parked car, every potential threat. Prince George chatted excitedly with Mrs. Davies about the rare orchids they would see, completely unaware of the complex security operations surrounding his simple day out. Detective Crawford's voice crackled through Sarah's earpiece as they approached the venue. The advance team reported all clear with over 200 police officers positioned throughout the area. Barriers had been erected to keep crowds at a safe distance, and every entrance had been thoroughly swept by bomb disposal units. Sarah's radio buzzed with routine updates from the command center. Weather conditions were perfect, crowd numbers were manageable, and the media had been positioned in their designated areas. Yet as their convoy pulled through the main gates of the Royal Hospital Chelsea, Sarah noticed a maintenance van parked slightly out of place near the back entrance. She made a mental note to check on the vehicle later. Though it had probably been cleared by the advance team hours earlier, her job required paranoia about details others might dismiss as insignificant. Every unusual element needed investigation, no matter how innocent it appeared. The prince's excitement grew as they stepped out of the vehicle. Hundreds of well-wishers had gathered behind the barriers, waving flags and calling his name. George waved back with the natural grace his parents had taught him. Though Sarah noticed he seemed smaller and more vulnerable surrounded by the crowd's enthusiasm. Mrs. Davies straightened the prince's tie while Sarah coordinated final positions with her team. The walkabout would begin in 5 minutes, following a carefully planned route through the most spectacular gardens. Each step had been measured, each pause location predetermined, each interaction scripted to ensure both safety and public engagement. Sarah's colleague, Detective Sergeant Mark Thompson, approached with the final all-clear from the perimeter team. Every guest had been security checked, every vendor vetted, every possible escape route mapped and monitored. The operation represented months of planning for these few precious hours of public engagement. As they began walking toward the main exhibition area, Sarah positioned herself 3 feet behind and to the left of Prince George. This angle allowed her to monitor both the approaching crowds and potential threats from behind. Her right hand remained close to her concealed weapon, though she hoped never to need it. The first garden they visited showcased prize-winning roses in every conceivable color and variety. The prince listened politely as the garden designer explained the growing techniques, though Sarah could see his attention wandering toward a group of children pressed against the nearby barrier. His natural instinct was to interact with people his own age, something that always created additional security challenges. Photographers captured every moment as Prince George knelt to smell a particularly fragrant pink rose. The image would undoubtedly appear on front pages worldwide, showing the young royal's genuine appreciation for nature. These moments made all the security preparations worthwhile, allowing the public to connect with their future king's personality. Sarah's earpiece buzzed with an update from the command post. All positions remained secure, though they had noted increased social media activity about the prince's visit. Modern royal protection required monitoring digital threats alongside physical ones, as online harassment could quickly escalate to real-world danger. The maintenance van she had noticed earlier still bothered Sarah, though she tried to focus on immediate threats. Her team had swept the entire area multiple times, yet experienced protection officers learned to trust their instincts even when logic suggested otherwise. Something about today felt different, though she couldn't identify exactly what was triggering her concern. As they moved toward the butterfly garden, Prince George's favorite part of the visit, Sarah made another sweep of their surroundings. The crowd remained enthusiastic but controlled. The media stayed in their designated positions and her team maintained perfect formation. Everything appeared exactly as planned, yet her unease continued growing with each passing minute. When instincts become reality, the butterfly garden exceeded even Prince George's expectations. Hundreds of colorful butterflies fluttered freely in the enclosed greenhouse, creating a magical atmosphere that temporarily made Sarah forget her growing anxiety. The prince stood mesmerized as a large monarch butterfly landed gently on his outstretched finger, his face lighting up with pure wonder. Mrs. Davies captured the moment with her phone while the official photographers documented every angle. These genuine expressions of joy were exactly why the royal family maintained their public engagements despite security risks. The connection between the monarchy and the people depended on these authentic interactions. Sarah positioned herself near the greenhouse entrance, maintaining visual contact with Prince George while monitoring the growing crowd outside. The butterfly garden's popularity had drawn more visitors than anticipated, creating bottlenecks in the planned route. She spoke quietly into her microphone, requesting additional crowd control officers for the next section of their visit. Detective Crawford's voice came through her earpiece with an update about timing. They were running 7 minutes behind schedule, which meant adjusting the remainder of the itinerary. Security operations required precise timing to maintain effectiveness, as delays could create unexpected vulnerabilities in their protective shield. As they prepared to leave the butterfly garden, Sarah noticed a man in gardener's clothing lingering near their exit route. Something about his posture seemed wrong, too alert, too focused on their group rather than his supposed work. Her hand moved instinctively closer to her radio as she made eye contact with Detective Sergeant Thompson across the pathway. Thompson had noticed the same individual and was already moving to investigate. Years of working together had created an almost telepathic communication between team members. A slight nod or gesture could convey volumes of information without alerting potential threats to their increased vigilance. The suspected gardener moved away as Thompson approached, disappearing into the crowd with suspicious ease. Sarah made a mental note of his appearance. Medium height, dark hair, approximately 30 years old, with calloused hands that suggested genuine manual labor experience. Yet his behavior had been inconsistent with someone focused on garden maintenance. Prince George emerged from the butterfly garden still excited about his close encounter with the monarch butterfly. He began telling Mrs. Davies about a book he had read about butterfly migration, his enthusiasm infectious despite Sarah's growing concern about their security situation. Children possessed an remarkable ability to find joy even surrounded by invisible threats. Their next destination was the Mediterranean garden, featuring drought-resistant plants and a stunning water feature. The route required crossing an open courtyard where crowds had gathered 3 deep behind temporary barriers. Sarah coordinated with her team to create a secure corridor through the well-wishers. As they began crossing the courtyard, Sarah spotted the maintenance van again, now parked even closer to their planned route. Her earlier unease crystallized into genuine alarm when she noticed the van's license plate didn't match the documentation she had reviewed during the morning briefing. Small discrepancies often revealed larger problems in security operations. She immediately radioed Detective Crawford about the suspicious vehicle, while continuing to escort Prince George through the crowd. Maintaining normal appearances was crucial. Any sign of increased security concern could trigger panic among the civilians or alert potential threats to their awareness of danger. The prince waved to children pressed against the barriers, occasionally stopping to accept flowers or drawings they had brought for him. These spontaneous interactions were impossible to fully secure, but represented the heart of royal public engagement. Sarah's job was managing acceptable risks while preserving the monarchy's connection to the people. Detective Crawford's response came through her earpiece within minutes. The maintenance van was not authorized to be in that location, and the license plate belonged to a vehicle reported stolen 3 days earlier in Birmingham. Every protection officer's worst nightmare was unfolding in real time during a public engagement. Sarah's training kicked in as she began smoothly repositioning Prince George toward their backup evacuation route. She couldn't create alarm among the crowd, but she needed to get him to safety immediately. Years of preparation for exactly this scenario guided her actions as she signaled Mrs. Davies to stay close. The crowd around them continued cheering and taking photos, completely unaware that a potential threat had been identified nearby. Sarah marveled at how normal everything appeared on the surface while her team mobilized to address what could be a serious security breach. Professional protection officers learned to function in this strange dual reality. Thompson appeared at her shoulder, confirming that additional units were moving to surround the suspicious van. Bomb disposal experts were being rushed to the scene, though they hoped the vehicle simply contained overzealous royal watchers rather than something more sinister. Every threat had to be treated as potentially lethal until proven otherwise. As they approached the Mediterranean garden, Sarah noticed unusual movement in her peripheral vision. The fake gardener from earlier had reappeared, now positioned near their alternate exit route. Her pulse quickened as she realized they might be dealing with a coordinated threat rather than a single suspicious individual. She spoke calmly to Prince George, suggesting they visit the rose garden instead of continuing with their planned route. The prince readily agreed, excited to see more flowers, while Sarah guided them away from both suspicious individuals. Flexibility in security operations often meant the difference between successful protection and disaster. Mrs. Davies sensed the subtle change in atmosphere, though she couldn't identify specific threats. Her years of experience with royal engagements had taught her to trust her protection team's judgment completely. She began engaging Prince George in conversation about his favorite flowers, helping maintain his relaxed mood while they navigated toward safety. Sarah's earpiece crackled with urgent updates. The bomb disposal team had found the stolen van empty, but discovered evidence of recent occupancy. Fresh food containers and surveillance photos of the flower show suggested someone had been conducting reconnaissance from that position. The investigation was expanding rapidly. Detective Crawford's voice cut through the radio chatter with new instructions. They were implementing immediate extraction protocols, moving Prince George to the secure area near the main entrance where their convoy waited. The public engagement was ending earlier than scheduled, though they would announce it as a simple schedule adjustment. As they walked briskly but calmly toward the extraction point, Sarah spotted a third suspicious individual near the gift shop. Her worst fears were confirmed. They were dealing with multiple potential threats positioned strategically around the venue. What had begun as a routine public appearance was rapidly becoming a complex security emergency. The moment Sarah spotted the third suspicious individual, her years of training crystallized into pure instinct. She could no longer treat this as a precautionary situation. Multiple individuals positioned around their route, a stolen vehicle, and surveillance photos added up to one terrifying conclusion. Someone was planning to harm Prince George. Detective Crawford's voice came through her earpiece with controlled urgency. Additional suspects had been identified through CCTV analysis, and the Counter-Terrorism Command was now coordinating the response. What had started as a routine royal protection operation had escalated to a national security incident. Sarah guided Prince George toward a temporary pavilion that offered better defensive positions while maintaining the appearance of a casual visit. The prince remained happily unaware of the danger, chatting about wanting to see the prize-winning orchids before leaving. His innocent excitement broke her heart, knowing she might have to shatter his perfect day to keep him alive. Mrs. Davies moved closer to Prince George, her maternal instincts sensing the change in atmosphere even without knowing specifics. Sarah caught her eye and gave a subtle signal they had practiced countless times. Be ready to move quickly on command. The nanny's face remained calm, but her grip on her handbag tightened slightly. Thompson appeared at Sarah's left shoulder, speaking in the casual tone they used to communicate during threats. 3 more suspicious individuals had been identified, bringing the total to 6 potential hostiles positioned around the flower show. The coordination suggested professional planning rather than opportunistic criminals. The crowd around them continued enjoying the flower displays, completely unaware that protection officers were identifying and tracking multiple threats nearby. Sarah marveled at how quickly a peaceful public event could transform into a potential battlefield while maintaining its innocent appearance on the surface. Detective Crawford updated their extraction plan through her earpiece. The main convoy would create a diversion, while a backup vehicle approached from the service entrance. Prince George would be moved during the confusion, hopefully before any potential attackers realized their window of opportunity was closing. Sarah's radio buzzed with reports from observers positioned around the perimeter. 2 suspects near the main entrance had been observed checking their watches repeatedly, while another had been photographing exit routes rather than flower displays. The evidence of coordinated planning was becoming overwhelming. As they approached the orchid display, Sarah noticed the fake gardener from earlier making another appearance. This time he carried pruning shears that could serve as weapons, and his position blocked their most direct route to the service entrance. Her hand moved instinctively to her concealed weapon while she calculated alternative escape routes. Prince George stopped to admire a particularly exotic orchid, asking Mrs. Davies to read him the information placard. His genuine fascination with the flowers provided perfect cover for Sarah to assess their tactical situation. She counted at least 4 visible threats with unknown numbers of additional hostiles potentially positioned beyond her sight. Thompson moved to intercept the armed gardener while Sarah prepared to evacuate Prince George at the first sign of aggressive action. Years of scenario training had prepared them for exactly this situation, though the reality felt more intense than any exercise. The prince's safety depended on split-second decisions and flawless teamwork. The crowd suddenly surged forward as news spread that Prince George was visiting the orchid display. The unexpected movement created chaos that could either help or hinder their security operation. Sarah quickly repositioned to maintain protective coverage while the additional bodies made tracking threats more difficult. Detective Crawford's voice cut through the noise in her earpiece. Armed police units were moving into position around the venue, though they needed to avoid creating panic among the innocent civilians. The balance between adequate response and public safety required careful coordination as the situation continued escalating. Sarah guided Prince George away from the growing crowd, using the natural flow of visitors to mask their movement toward the service area. She spoke cheerfully about seeing more flowers while her eyes constantly swept for threats. Professional protection meant compartmentalizing fear to focus entirely on immediate security needs. Mrs. Davies engaged Prince George in conversation about his favorite parts of the visit, helping maintain his relaxed mood while they navigated through the increasingly complex situation. Her calm presence provided psychological comfort for the prince while allowing Sarah to concentrate on tactical concerns. The radio crackled with an urgent update. One of the suspects had been observed receiving what appeared to be a signal from someone outside the venue. The coordination between multiple individuals was now confirmed, transforming their assessment from possible threat to active conspiracy against the royal family. Sarah's pulse quickened as she realized they were dealing with a sophisticated operation rather than simple criminal opportunism. The level of planning and coordination suggested professional training, possibly military or intelligence backgrounds. This was exactly the type of threat that kept royal protection officers awake at night. As they approached the service entrance, Thompson's voice came through her earpiece with alarming news. The fake gardener had been joined by 2 accomplices, and they were moving to intercept the prince's route to safety. The window for peaceful extraction was rapidly closing as multiple threats converged on their position. Detective Crawford made the decision to activate emergency protocols immediately. Armed response units would move openly to secure Prince George, while flood protection officers engaged the identified threats. The careful balance between discretion and security had tipped definitively toward immediate action. Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied the transition from surveillance to active protection. Everything they had trained for was about to be tested in the most serious possible circumstances. Prince George's life depended on their ability to outthink and outmaneuver what appeared to be a well-organized conspiracy. The service entrance came into view just as Sarah spotted movement in her peripheral vision. Multiple figures were now approaching from different directions, their coordinated timing confirming her worst fears. The peaceful flower show was about to become a battlefield, with a 10-year-old prince at the center of the storm. She grabbed Prince George's hand gently but firmly, preparing to run toward safety, while praying their training and preparation would be enough to overcome whatever was coming next. The next few minutes would determine whether her years of dedication to royal protection had prepared her for the ultimate test of loyalty and courage. The attack began with terrifying suddenness. Sarah had just taken Prince George's hand when she heard Thompson shout a warning behind them. She spun to see the fake gardener lunging toward them with pruning shears raised, his disguise abandoned as he moved with military precision toward the young prince. Training took over as Sarah pushed Prince George behind her while drawing her weapon in one fluid motion. Mrs. Davies screamed and pulled the prince further back, her maternal instincts overriding her own safety as chaos erupted around them. The peaceful flower show transformed into a scene from a nightmare within seconds. Thompson engaged the armed gardener in hand-to-hand combat, his defensive training evident as he disarmed the attacker with brutal efficiency. But Sarah could see more threats converging from multiple directions, their careful positioning now revealing the sophistication of the planned assault. This was no random crime, but a coordinated military-style operation. Detective Crawford's voice exploded through her earpiece as armed response units mobilized throughout the venue. Innocent visitors began screaming and running as the reality of the situation became impossible to hide. The careful balance between public engagement and security had shattered completely. Sarah dragged Prince George toward the service entrance while scanning for additional threats. The boy was crying now, finally understanding that something terrible was happening. She felt his small hand trembling in hers as she guided him through the maze of panicking visitors and overturned flower displays. 2 more attackers appeared from behind a large greenhouse, moving to cut off their escape route. Sarah realized with growing horror that every exit had been covered by the conspiracy. Someone had studied royal protection protocols extensively to position threats so effectively around the venue. She fired 2 warning shots into the air, hoping to scatter the approaching attackers while signaling her team's location. The sound of gunfire sent the remaining flower show visitors into complete panic, creating a chaotic environment that worked both for and against their escape attempt. Mrs. Davies stumbled while trying to keep pace with Prince George, her elderly legs struggling with the sudden demands of running for their lives. Sarah caught her arm, knowing they couldn't afford to leave anyone behind. The nanny's devotion to Prince George was absolute, but her physical limitations were becoming dangerous. Thompson's voice crackled through her radio as he pursued one of the fleeing attackers. 2 suspects had been subdued, but at least 4 more remained active in the area. The numbers were still heavily against their small protection team. Despite the arrival of armed backup units around the perimeter, Sarah spotted their backup extraction vehicle approaching through the service area, but 2 more attackers were moving to intercept it. She realized with sinking dread that the conspiracy extended beyond the flower show itself. Someone had been monitoring police communications to stay ahead of their security responses. Prince George stumbled and fell, scraping his knee on the concrete pathway. Blood seeped through his torn trouser leg as Sarah helped him up, her heart breaking at seeing this innocent child caught in such violence. His tears mixed with dirt as she carried him the final distance toward their escape vehicle. The backup driver, Detective Constable Williams, had his weapon drawn and was engaging the approaching threats. Sarah could hear the distinctive crack of police firearms as her colleagues fought to clear their escape route. The battle for Prince George's safety was being fought by brave officers throughout the venue. More armed police arrived as Sarah reached the vehicle, their tactical gear and automatic weapons finally providing adequate firepower to match the sophisticated threat they faced. She bundled Prince George into the armored car while Mrs. Davies collapsed into the seat beside him, both of them shaking from the trauma they had endured. Detective Crawford's voice came through the radio with an update that chilled Sarah's blood. Intelligence services had identified the attackers as foreign operatives with advanced military training. This wasn't a kidnapping attempt by common criminals, but an international conspiracy against the British royal family. As their vehicle sped away from the flower show, Sarah could hear continued gunfire behind them. Her colleagues were still fighting to neutralize the remaining threats and secure the area. She felt torn between relief at Prince George's safety and guilt about leaving her team behind in active combat. Prince George had stopped crying but remained silent, staring out the window at the chaos they were leaving behind. Sarah recognized the signs of traumatic shock in his young face and knew this day would haunt his memories forever. The innocence of childhood had been shattered by adult violence and hatred. Mrs. Davies held the prince's hand while speaking softly about returning home safely to his parents. Her own trauma was evident, but her focus remained entirely on providing comfort to the child in her care. These moments of human compassion offered hope amid the surrounding darkness and violence. Their radio crackled with updates as they raced toward Kensington Palace. 3 attackers had been killed in the firefight, 2 captured alive and 1 remained at large somewhere in London. The immediate threat was neutralized, but questions about the conspiracy's scope remained unanswered. Sarah finally allowed herself to breathe as the palace gates came into view. Prince George would be safe behind those walls while investigators worked to understand how such a sophisticated attack had been planned and executed. Her successful protection of the prince vindicated years of training and preparation. Detective Crawford reported that the captured attackers were refusing to cooperate with interrogation, but their equipment and communication devices were providing valuable intelligence. The investigation would continue for months as security services worked to identify everyone involved in the conspiracy. As they pulled into the palace courtyard, Sarah saw Prince William and Catherine running toward their vehicle. The relief on their faces was heartbreaking as they reached for their son, finally able to hold him safely after the terrifying reports they had received about the attack. Prince George ran into his parents' arms while Sarah stood back, her duty fulfilled but her mind already analyzing what could have been done differently. Every protection operation ended with this kind of review, searching for improvements that might prevent future attacks from succeeding. The immediate crisis was over, but Sarah knew the investigation was just beginning. Someone had come terrifyingly close to harming the future King of England, and understanding how required examining every detail of their security procedures and intelligence-gathering capabilities. The stakes had never been higher. The secure briefing room beneath Kensington Palace buzzed with urgent activity as intelligence officers worked to piece together the conspiracy that had nearly succeeded in harming Prince George. Sarah sat exhausted in a metal chair, still wearing her torn and dirty clothing from the flower show. As investigators questioned her about every detail of the attack, Detective Crawford stood before a wall of monitors displaying surveillance footage, photographs of the captured attackers and intelligence reports flooding in from international partners. The scope of the conspiracy was becoming clear, and it extended far beyond what anyone had initially imagined. This wasn't just an isolated attack but part of a larger campaign. The 2 captured attackers had finally been identified through fingerprint analysis and facial recognition technology. Both were former military personnel from Eastern Europe with extensive special operations training. Their presence in London suggested state-sponsored terrorism rather than criminal opportunism, raising the stakes to international incident levels. Sarah reviewed her written statement one more time, ensuring every detail was accurate for the official record. Her split-second decisions during the attack would be analyzed by experts for months to come, looking for lessons that could improve future royal protection operations. Success often taught more than failure in their dangerous profession. Intelligence Officer Rebecca Stone briefed the assembled team on the recovered communications equipment. The attackers had been using encrypted satellite phones to coordinate their movements, suggesting significant financial backing and technical sophistication. Someone with substantial resources had funded this assault on the British royal family. The captured cell phones contained GPS coordinates for several other royal residences, including Balmoral Castle and Sandringham House. The conspiracy appeared to target multiple members of the royal family simultaneously, which would have created chaos throughout. The security services and possibly succeeded through distraction and resource. Division. Detective Crawford announced that Prince George was receiving counseling from specialist trauma psychologists while remaining under enhanced security protocols. The young prince's psychological recovery was as important as the physical security measures being implemented. Children process traumatic experiences differently than adults, requiring specialized care approaches. Sarah learned that her colleague Thompson had been hospitalized with injuries sustained during his fight with the armed gardener. His quick thinking and physical courage had been crucial in preventing the initial attack from succeeding. She made a mental note to visit him as soon as the briefing sessions concluded. The investigation team revealed that surveillance footage from around London had identified at least 12 individuals involved in the broader conspiracy. Some had been conducting reconnaissance on royal residences for weeks before the attack, while others had been monitoring police communication frequencies to stay ahead of security responses. Intelligence Officer Stone displayed photographs of the conspiracy's apparent leader, a man known only as the Coordinator, who had orchestrated similar attacks against government officials in 3 other European countries. His involvement suggested this was part of a broader destabilization campaign rather than an isolated incident, targeting the British monarchy. The recovered surveillance photos from the stolen van showed detailed intelligence about Prince George's security arrangements, daily schedules, and even his favorite activities. Someone with inside access to royal household information had been feeding intelligence to the attackers for an extended period before the assault. Sarah felt sick realizing how completely their security measures had been compromised by insider threats. Every protection officer lived with the knowledge that their greatest vulnerability came from trusted individuals who might be corrupted or coerced into betraying their duties. The possibility haunted every operation they conducted. Detective Crawford outlined the enhanced security measures being implemented immediately throughout all royal residences and public engagements. Every staff member would undergo renewed background investigations. All communication systems would be upgraded, and new counter-surveillance protocols would be activated to detect future reconnaissance attempts. The international implications of the attack were becoming clear as intelligence services from allied nations shared information about related threats and suspicious activities. The conspiracy against the British royal family was part of a coordinated campaign to destabilize democratic institutions throughout Europe. Intelligence Officer Stone revealed that financial records recovered from the attackers showed payments from shell companies, traced back to hostile foreign governments. The attack on Prince George was state-sponsored terrorism, designed to create chaos and demonstrate that no target was beyond their reach. Sarah was informed that she would receive commendation for her actions during the attack, though she felt no satisfaction in the recognition. Her job was protecting Prince George, not earning medals, and she was more concerned about preventing future attacks than celebrating past successes. The briefing continued with analysis of how the attackers had obtained their sophisticated equipment and intelligence. The level of planning and resources involved suggested a long-term operation with significant state backing. This wasn't opportunistic crime, but professional warfare conducted against civilian targets. Detective Crawford announced that the investigation would expand to include review of all recent royal staff appointments, vendor contracts, and security clearances. The insider threat had to be identified and neutralized before additional attacks could be launched using compromised intelligence about royal protection procedures. Sarah was exhausted but knew her work was far from finished. The successful protection of Prince George was only the first step in a much larger battle against forces that threatened the stability of the British monarchy and democratic government. Her dedication to duty had never been more critical. The recovered communication intercepts revealed that additional attacks had been planned against other European royal families and government officials. The conspiracy was international in scope, requiring unprecedented cooperation between intelligence services to identify and neutralize all participants. As the briefing concluded, Sarah realized that her life had changed forever during those terrifying minutes at the flower show. She was no longer just a protection officer doing her job, but a witness to international terrorism who would be involved in the investigation and prosecution for years to come. The immediate crisis was over, but the broader threat remained active. Somewhere in London and across Europe, other members of this conspiracy were still planning attacks against democratic institutions and the people who served them. Sarah's successful protection of Prince George had won one battle in what was clearly going to be a much longer war. Walking through the palace corridors toward home, Sarah thought about Prince George sleeping safely in his room, surrounded by enhanced security, but still processing the trauma of what he had experienced. Her dedication to protecting him had been tested in the most extreme circumstances possible, and she had not failed in her duty to keep him safe. 3 weeks after the attack at the Chelsea Flower Show, Sarah walked through the corridors of New Scotland Yard, where the investigation had expanded into a major international operation. The Counterterrorism Command had taken over multiple floors of the building as evidence continued pouring in from intelligence agencies across Europe and beyond. Detective Inspector Crawford met her at the security checkpoint, his face showing the strain of coordinating one of the largest counterterrorism investigations in British history. The conspiracy to attack Prince George had revealed connections to similar plots against government officials in France, Germany, and Sweden, creating a complex web that investigators were still untangling. Sarah entered the main briefing room where dozens of analysts worked at computer terminals, tracking financial transactions, communication intercepts, and surveillance footage from across the continent. The scope of the conspiracy had grown far beyond anyone's initial assessment, revealing a sophisticated network dedicated to destabilizing democratic governments through targeted assassinations. Intelligence. Officer Rebecca Stone approached with an update that sent chills through Sarah's already exhausted mind. The insider who had provided intelligence about Prince George's security arrangements had been identified as someone with the highest possible clearance levels within the royal household. The betrayal came from the very heart of the institution they had sworn to protect. The arrested insider was revealed to be Marcus Hartwell, a senior staff member who had worked at Kensington Palace for over 15 years. His access to Prince George's schedule, security protocols, and even personal preferences had provided the attackers with everything they needed to plan their assault. Trust had been weaponized against the royal family. Sarah felt physically ill learning how completely their security had been compromised from within. Hartwell had attended security briefings, knew evacuation routes, and understood exactly how protection officers would respond to different threat scenarios. The attackers had been fighting with insider knowledge of their tactics and procedures. Detective Crawford explained that Hartwell's motivation appeared to be purely financial rather than ideological. Bank records showed payments totaling over £2 million from shell companies connected to hostile foreign intelligence services. He had sold out Prince George's safety for money, making his betrayal even more despicable than political extremism. The investigation had revealed that Hartwell had been providing intelligence about royal activities for nearly 2 years before the attack. Dozens of public engagements had been compromised, with detailed security information passed to unknown recipients who could have struck at any time they chose. Sarah learned that similar insider threats had been identified within other European security services, suggesting a coordinated recruitment campaign by hostile intelligence agencies. The attack on Prince George was part of a broader operation to place assets within the highest levels of government and royal security apparatus intelligence. Officer Stone briefed the team on communications intercepted from other conspiracy members still at large. Plans for additional attacks had been discovered, targeting not just British royals but also prime ministers and other senior officials across NATO countries. The scope was truly international in its ambitions. The psychological impact on Prince George remained a primary concern for his family and protection team. Child psychologists reported that he was experiencing nightmares and anxiety about public appearances, which was exactly the kind of lasting damage terrorists hope to achieve through their violence. Sarah had spent several sessions with counselors herself, processing the trauma of realizing how close she had come to failing in her most important duty. The knowledge that they had been operating with compromised intelligence made her question every decision she had made during the attack at the flower show. Detective Crawford revealed that the captured attackers had finally begun cooperating with interrogators after learning about Hartwell's arrest. The insider's betrayal had broken their operational security, making them realize their organization was collapsing around them and cooperation might reduce their prison sentences. The breakthrough in interrogations led to raids across London and several other European cities, with law enforcement agencies coordinating simultaneous operations to arrest remaining conspiracy members before they could disappear or launch additional attacks. Sarah watched live feeds from the operations, seeing heavily armed officers storming safe houses and apartments. 17 additional arrests were made during the coordinated raids, including the mysterious coordinator who had orchestrated the attack on Prince George. His capture represented a major victory against the international network that had threatened democratic institutions across multiple countries. Sarah was informed that she would be testifying before Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee about the security failures that had enabled the attack. Her testimony would help lawmakers understand how insider threats could compromise even the most sophisticated protection systems. The recovered intelligence revealed that the conspiracy had been planning to broadcast live footage of Prince George's kidnapping to create maximum psychological impact on the British public. Cameras had been positioned around the flower show to capture the attack from multiple angles, transforming the young prince's suffering into terrorist propaganda. Detective Crawford showed Sarah intercepted communications discussing plans to hold Prince George for ransom while making political demands about British foreign policy. The 10-year-old boy would have become a bargaining chip in international negotiations, subjected to psychological torture designed to break his spirit and traumatize the nation. Intelligence Officer Stone briefed the team on evidence recovered from safe houses used by the conspiracy. Detailed maps of other royal residences, photographs of Prince William and Catherine, and surveillance reports about Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis revealed that the entire family had been targeted for potential attacks. Sarah learned that counter-surveillance teams had been monitoring her own movements in the weeks before the attack, gathering intelligence about royal protection procedures by studying how she and her colleagues operated. Even the protectors had been watched and analyzed by enemies they never knew existed. The financial investigation revealed that the conspiracy had spent over £10 million preparing for the coordinated attacks across Europe. Money had flowed through dozens of shell companies and cryptocurrency exchanges, demonstrating the sophisticated resources available to hostile intelligence agencies operating in democratic countries. Detective Crawford announced that enhanced security protocols would become permanent fixtures of royal protection operations. Every staff member would undergo continuous monitoring. All communications would be encrypted with rotating keys, and new counterintelligence measures would be implemented to detect future insider threats. Sarah felt a mixture of satisfaction and ongoing concern as she reviewed the investigation's progress. The immediate conspiracy had been dismantled, but the underlying threat remained active. Other hostile intelligence services would study this operation's failures and develop new approaches to attacking democratic institutions. The psychological evaluation of the captured attackers revealed ideological extremism, combined with professional military training, creating individuals capable of sustained violence in pursuit of political goals. Understanding their mindset would help security services identify similar threats before they could organize and strike. Intelligence Officer Stone revealed that several European governments were implementing new counterintelligence initiatives based on lessons learned from the Prince George attack. The conspiracy's near success had shocked security services into recognizing vulnerabilities they had previously overlooked or underestimated. Sarah was told that Prince George's public appearances would resume gradually, with enhanced security measures that remained invisible to preserve the appearance of normal royal engagement with the public. The young prince's courage in eventually returning to his duties would demonstrate that terrorism could not destroy the institutions it sought to undermine, and the investigation team prepared comprehensive reports for distribution to allied intelligence services, sharing everything they had learned about the conspiracy's methods, funding sources, and operational procedures. Cooperation between democratic nations had proven essential in defending against sophisticated state-sponsored terrorism. As the briefing concluded, Sarah reflected on how the attack had changed her understanding of the threats facing the royal family. Simple criminal opportunism had been replaced by professional intelligence, operations with unlimited resources and insider access to the highest levels of government and security apparatus. Walking back through London streets toward Kensington Palace, Sarah noticed the increased security presence that had become routine since the attack. Armed police patrols, surveillance cameras, and counter-terrorism officers provided visible reminders that the threat environment had fundamentally changed for everyone involved in protecting democratic institutions. The investigation would continue for months as prosecutors prepared cases against the captured conspirators and intelligence services worked to Eden. A new chapter of service. 6 months after the attack at the Chelsea Flower Show, Sarah stood on the balcony of Buckingham Palace watching Prince George participate in his first public engagement since the traumatic events that had nearly claimed his life. The trooping the color ceremony proceeded with enhanced security measures that remained invisible to the cheering crowds below, a testament to lessons learned through tragedy and determination. Prince George appeared confident and happy as he waved to the gathered well-wishers, his resilience in overcoming the psychological trauma of the attack, inspiring everyone who had witnessed his journey back to public life. Child psychologists had worked closely with him for months, helping him process the frightening memories while rebuilding his confidence in the safety of royal duties. The young prince had insisted on returning to public engagements despite his parents' initial reluctance to expose him to potential danger again. His courage in facing the crowds demonstrated the strength of character that would serve him well as future king, refusing to allow terrorists to drive him into hiding or fear. Sarah's role had evolved significantly since the conspiracy's exposure and dismantling. She now served as senior advisor for counterintelligence within the Royal Protection Command, helping develop new protocols to prevent insider threats from compromising security operations. Her experience during the attack had provided valuable insights into vulnerabilities that needed addressing. The trial of Marcus Hartwell, the insider who had betrayed Prince George's security information, had concluded with a sentence of life imprisonment for treason and conspiracy to commit terrorism. His testimony during the proceedings had revealed additional details about how hostile intelligence services recruited assets within democratic institutions, information that proved invaluable for counterintelligence operations detective. Crawford had been promoted to deputy assistant commissioner in recognition of his leadership during the crisis and subsequent investigation. The successful dismantling of the international conspiracy had demonstrated the effectiveness of coordinated law enforcement responses to sophisticated threats against democratic governments and royal institutions. Intelligence officer Rebecca Stone continued leading the ongoing investigation into remaining conspiracy members who had escaped the initial arrests. Several individuals remained at large across Europe and beyond, requiring sustained international cooperation to locate and apprehend before they could organize new attacks against government officials or royal families. Thompson had recovered from his injuries sustained during the hand-to-hand combat at the Flower Show and returned to active duty with commendation for his courage under fire. His quick thinking and physical intervention had been crucial in preventing the initial attack from succeeding, earning him recognition as a hero within the protection community. Mrs. Eleanor Davies had retired from royal service shortly after the attack, the trauma proving too much for her to continue in her role as Prince George's nanny. She remained in contact with the family and took pride in knowing her devotion to protecting the young prince had contributed to his survival during those terrifying moments. The enhanced security protocols developed in response to the conspiracy had been adopted by protection services throughout NATO countries, creating new standards for defending against state-sponsored terrorism, targeting democratic institutions. The attack on Prince George had ultimately strengthened security measures across the entire alliance. Sarah often reflected on the split-second decisions that had determined the outcome of that October morning at the Chelsea Flower Show. Years of training and preparation had been tested in the most extreme circumstances possible, and the successful protection of Prince George validated the dedication and professionalism of everyone involved in royal security operations. The psychological impact on all participants continued to require ongoing counseling and support. Sarah had learned that surviving traumatic events was only the beginning of a longer journey toward processing and integrating the experience into a healthy understanding of duty and service. Prince George's return to public life represented a victory against terrorism and extremism that sought to destroy democratic institutions through fear and violence. His courage in facing crowds again demonstrated that the values the royal family represented could not be eliminated through intimidation or assault. The broader investigation had revealed connections to terrorist networks operating across multiple continents, leading to enhanced intelligence sharing between democratic nations facing similar threats. The attack on Prince George had become a catalyst for improved international cooperation against state-sponsored terrorism. Sarah's testimony before Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee had contributed to new legislation, strengthening background investigations for personnel with access to classified security information. The insider threat represented one of the most dangerous vulnerabilities facing democratic governments and required constant vigilance to detect and prevent. As the ceremony concluded and Prince George returned safely to Buckingham Palace, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction in knowing that her dedication to protecting him had been tested in the most extreme circumstances and had not failed. The young prince's safety remained her highest priority, and no terrorist conspiracy would ever compromise that commitment. The crowds dispersed peacefully, unaware of the sophisticated security operation that had ensured their safety and that of the royal family throughout the event. Sarah's colleagues had learned to operate with enhanced vigilance while maintaining the appearance of normal public engagement that was essential to the monarchy's connection with the people. Walking through the palace corridors at the end of another successful protection operation, Sarah thought about the ongoing threats that required constant attention and preparation. The conspiracy against Prince George had been defeated, but other enemies of democratic society continued planning attacks that would test their vigilance and courage. Her career in royal protection had been defined by that October morning when training, instinct, and determination had combined to save Prince George's life. The experience had strengthened her commitment to service while providing valuable lessons about the evolving nature of threats facing democratic institutions in an increasingly dangerous world. The future remained uncertain, but Sarah was confident that the enhanced security measures, improved intelligence capabilities, and strengthened international cooperation developed in response to the conspiracy would help protect not just the British royal family, but democratic leaders throughout the free world. Her successful protection of Prince George had become part of a larger victory against the forces of extremism and terrorism.